And then what we found out, um, when you bring a new sorority on campus, you have to be within the guidelines of the Panhellenic Council.
Okay.
Okay, well, as it turned out, our sorority's requirements were a lot stiffer than the requirements here on campus. So our sorority standards were really dropped because of being here.
Like the academic ones? And okay. Well, that's interesting.
So
do we want to put the camera on?
I already have it on.
I
I already have you mic'd up and everything, so we could get a little bit of that, what you were talking about.
We primarily want to talk to you about St. Paul, but I also want to hear some about your time on campus while we're on camera, and that we got, in addition to the St. Paul video, the one we're working on right now is it's really about campus desegregation, we've got some voices from some former students on campus, mainly clustered around the time you were here, which was the late 60s, right? So,
I was here from 68 to 71.
okay.
And then I got my master's in 73.
Remind me, what were your degrees in again?
My bachelor's degree is in business education, and then my master's was in guidance.
That's okay. Growing up, did you plan on attending A&M Commerce? You were in the area.
No.
Okay.
Well, first of all, growing up, I could not have attended A&M Commerce. So at the time that I was growing up, the considerations would have been one of the historically black colleges. And I had always assumed that I would probably go to either Texas College or Prairie View. And my dad had gone to Texas College, and most of my relatives from Emory had gone to Texas College. A few had gone to Jarvis and Bishop, but most had gone to Texas College.
Studying what sorts of things? Probably several teachers and.
Most studied education. Most became teachers.
So why commerce? Why? Guys, we had just desegregated.
Okay, that's why. Living only about a half hour from here, and at the time I came here, I had a brother that came here. So it was economics. And my dad did not want us to graduate from college owing a lot of money, and so we could afford to come here.
Good. Yeah. So was your family concerned about you not going to, that there may have been something lost going to an integrated school rather than a historically black university?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, first of all, my dad was an educator. So I was going to have an African American education no matter where I went. So that really wasn't an issue.
Okay. So what did you find when you came? What were your expectations? You were already part of the first wave of first in desegregating the public schools.
Well, first of all, I went to St. Paul in 1965, and that was when St. Paul closed. So
that was your first year of high school?
That was my junior year. So my senior year of high school was at Rains High School in my hometown. So that was the first, I guess you could say, shock as far as a different type of education, because I think there were 8 African Americans in our class, and that was the first graduating class in 1966. So that was the first taste of actually going to a school that was not all African American. And I went there for a year, and then when I graduated, I went to Henderson County, which is now Trinity Valley. And when I was nearing graduation, my mind was set that I was going to Prairie View. Most of my friends from St. Paul that were going to college were going to Prairie View, so I wanted to go to Prairie View. And as I look back on it, I think it was kind of different, but recruiters came to my house. I know they do that for athletes, but recruiters came to my house from Henderson County. And my dad was sold.
Ah!
Not I.
Oh.
But my dad was sold. So that's how I ended up going to Henderson County.
Was that a good decision?
I think any decision would have been a good decision for me. I was going to go to college, and I was going to graduate, and I was going to be successful. I mean, that was my decision. So even though I thought at the time it was horrible, it was okay.
Because your friends did end up going to Prairie View.
My friends did end up going to Prairie View, but there were a number of us from Rains that went to Henderson County. And it just so happened that none of my female friends went. There were, I think, 4 from my class at Rains, African Americans, that went to Henderson County along with me, but they were all guys.
Okay. Yeah. You were always a studious, you're always a good, serious student and
Yes.
thinking person, and yeah, a heavy reader. It came from the family, from I suppose reading. Yeah.
It did.
So, and you had good experiences with schooling throughout, it sounds like.
I did.
Maybe less so towards the end at St. Paul. That was, I guess St. Paul was at the end at that point. The facilities were coming apart. And
Well, actually, the facilities were very, very bad. The conditions were very, very bad. But I wouldn't say that about the education.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about what some of the high points of your education there at St. Paul? Any teachers or classes?
When I went to St. Paul, I left the school that my dad was principal, and at Sandflat, the grades were 1st through 8th. Teasingly, my best friend and I used to say, and I really meant this, I really could have gone to college leaving Sandflat.
Wow.
But I needed time to grow up. So that's what I say about St. Paul. That gave me time to grow up. But I really learned a lot in elementary school and at St. Paul. But the learning was totally different. A lot of it had to do with the fact that the teachers were very instrumental in my learning. at St. Paul, the homemaking teacher, Miss Thrash, she went far over and beyond what you would think of a teacher's duties as being. And in attending her classes, it was homemaking. It was called homemaking at the time. You learned a lot of things other than just homemaking, and they had the New Homemakers of America, which was the counterpoint for the Future Homemakers of America.
Ah, okay.
And when I was growing up at Sandflat and at St. Paul, whenever you had state meetings or state conferences, they were always at Prairie View. When you went to the Anglo schools, any state events would be in Austin.
Oh, okay.
Because my dad was a principal, I knew a little more about how schools, I think, operated than I would have otherwise. For example, the schools now all operate under the University Interscholastic League.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I was at Sandflat and at St. Paul, the Interscholastic League was Prairie View.
Oh, okay.
And so that's where the governing body was. It was at Prairie View. And so in being in Miss Thrash's classes, I got to go to district meetings and district meetings and state meetings. And the district meetings would be at various places in Texas, but the state meetings would be at Prairie View.
Ah, okay, okay.
And so that was very unusual to get to travel and go to meetings like that. And I did that for 3 years when I was at St. Paul. And I like to tell my friends who don't think that I'm very domestic, like cooking and sewing, I won the Crisco Outstanding Homemaker Award.
Hey now. So you can't do it. You're just.
So I did excel in homemaking. And when I went to Raines, my interest changed because of another teacher, Miss Shiflett, who was my business teacher. And I discovered shorthand, and I decided I wanted to be a business teacher. But a lot of the foundation was already set. I knew that I was going to go to college. I just didn't know that I was going to be a teacher.
Oh, okay, okay.
Actually, a teacher was the last thing I wanted to be at that particular time.
Why is that?
I guess kids usually don't want to be what their parents are.
You're rebelling.
And so I don't know if it was rebelling, it just wasn't interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so I just never really was interested in being a teacher.
Well, and your family was tickled, I guess, when you finally went that direction, huh?
I think my dad was
Yeah.
very pleased.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess it might be kind of hard to be a teacher when you know how the sausage is made. So,
Yeah.
But things were changing so rapidly as you were coming out onto the scene. What a time to come of age.
It really was. Like I said, I went to Raines High School the first year of desegregation. When I went to Henderson County, that was right after desegregation. So there were a lot of challenges, a lot of things that had not been integrated or desegregated at that time. And that was true when I went to East Texas State, now A&M Commerce. And when I excuse me, when I graduated in 1971, that was the first year that they had total desegregation in Dallas. So it's kind of like my whole career was being the first or being a part of the first. So
that's a lot of pressure.
So it was different.
Yeah.
And my first job, for example, was at Hillcrest High School. At that particular time, Hillcrest High School was thought of as probably the most elitist of the public schools in Dallas. And coming from Emory, Texas, that was a big change. Not just to be teaching the students that are very wealthy, but also they had some of the poorest students in Dallas that were bused to Hillcrest. So it was really different.
Did you witness or experience community resistance to change, or was it just sort of what the next step is going to be? I mean, I know there was a lot of tensions in response to busing, and there were a lot of tensions in response to a number of other things.
There were a lot of tensions in response to a lot of things the first few years that I taught. Particularly, like I said, Hillcrest had the very wealthy students, and then they had the very poor students bussed in. They made a lot of changes in the rules because they had the African American students there. And a lot of that was met with resistance. For example, before desegregation, Hillcrest was an open campus, and the kids could go home for lunch. They could go in and out during the day. By and large, they all had cars. The African American students were bused. So they changed that rule. You couldn't leave for lunch. So a lot of the Anglo students didn't like that. It didn't matter with the African American students because, except for a few, they all came on the bus anyway.
Yeah, didn't have any way to get anywhere. So, yeah. Oh, wow, what a time. You said that. Oh, that's what I want to hear about. Why did you start the museum? You told the story.
In starting the museum, it kind of evolved around a number of things. My husband and I, we've always been collectors. We've always collected books that are written by African Americans or about African Americans. We have collected African art. Not a lot, but we have collected. And generally, during the summer, we take a vacation. And when we go on vacation, we usually drive. And we've done a lot of traveling where we fly and spend a few days for a vacation. But over the past maybe 15 years, we decided to start seeing more of this country. So generally, we take a couple of weeks and we drive. And so in 1999, we decided that we were going to visit grandkids, and we were going to visit a lot of museums along the way. And at that time, we had grandkids in the Washington, D.C. area and in Louisiana. So all along the way, we were visiting African American museums. And we had visited museums in Alabama, in Mississippi, the Smithsonian. And on our way back, we stopped at a museum in Knoxville, Tennessee called the Beck Cultural Center. And so in our visiting there, there's a man from Knoxville that they had a lot of things that were his items, like he had been he had been a judge, I believe it was, and they had his robe, and they had different things that belonged to him. And so when my husband and I left there, we were thinking, and it was kind of like it struck both of us. We said, you know, we could do that. And so Ted said, we could do that in memory of your father, because my father was the last of the African American principals at the elementary school that I had attended in Emory. And so all the way back, we jotted down things, and I take shorthand, so when he would get ideas, he would tell me, get your pad. And so I would be writing and he would be talking, and we were driving along. So when we got back, we had basically decided how we were going to go about setting up the museum. And Ms. Shiflett, who had been my high school teacher, and Ms. Peoples, who had been a teacher that had worked under my father, I went to them and I discussed the proposal that we had. They thought it was a good idea. Both of them wanted to be volunteers. And so during the Christmas holidays, I started looking for a place. And in January, we had a museum.
In 6 months?
Actually, in about 3 months.
Wow.
In about 3 months. And in February, we had already had the building painted, carpet put in. We had our displays up, and we opened in February. But the city of Emory celebrates Founders Day the first weekend in May. And so that's when we had our grand opening, and that's when we celebrate our anniversary. But we actually opened in February.
How many years ago?
In 2000.
2000. Okay. And so, what are your proudest things? What makes you most proud about the museum in the last decade or so?
I think the thing that makes me most proud is it's in my hometown, and it's in recognition of my father, but it also represents the community. And I think when you can do something and can do it in your hometown, it takes on more meaning.
And it really seems to. I mean, it seems like the talk that we went to recently. It seems that the community gets how integral the important African American histories that are represented at that museum are to the larger history of the community. It's not a separate thing. That seems like the library's regularly involved. The local historians are regularly involved. And that's always been the case, or did you cultivate that?
It's always been the case, but yes, we have cultivated it, and we have focused on doing collaborative events. Emory is a very small town, so if you do anything in Emory and you don't include the whole community, you really don't have a lot of participation. And I live in Dallas, and I volunteer at the African American Museum in Dallas. I have volunteered at the African American Museum in Dallas, and you're there for a whole day, and you might see 5, 6 people come in. And that's in a large city. So I know that museums are not places that are just thriving and lots of people coming in. So when you undertake opening a museum in Emory, Texas, the average person in Emory, Texas has never been to a museum. If you are in the city, like in Dallas, kids go to museums as field trips, and they may never set foot in a museum again, but at least they've been on a field trip. In Emory, you don't take a field trip to a museum, so most kids don't know about museums, most adults don't. So you almost have to involve the entire community.
Yeah.
And so we have been very successful in doing that.
Do you get many school kids coming in, or?
We do.
Good.
In fact, we don't get nearly the number that I would think. It would appear to me that particularly elementary kids, you would get field trips all the time. We don't get a lot of them. We get some, but not what I would have expected.
Yeah.
The field trips that I have gotten the most pleasure out of has been MHMR.
Oh, nice.
There is a group that come to the museum. The group comes to the museum, and it's basically like taking a high school group, but it's really interesting to see how they respond to the museum. And some of them are very knowledgeable, very interested. So it's a very rewarding experience.
That's very nice. And I don't know this for sure, but is there another African American museum serving anywhere near you?
No. No.
Yeah. I know that. I know they tried to set one up in Plano, and that didn't work out.
We have had over the past, I'll say over the past maybe 8 years, giving our museum time that people became aware of it. We've had people from all over that have come to us and wanted advice on how to get started and this sort of thing. But the one thing that they want to know, and we can't help them, is they want to know, how can you get the funds? Yeah. And so that's generally why those that have started have not been able to do well, is because you can't get funding. It's almost impossible. And I know in the case of our museum, we have no wealthy relatives or...
Yeah, no benefactor or something.
Yeah, there are no artistic or historical foundations that want to give, to a museum in Emory, Texas.
Gotta look for that. questions for Mrs. Long?
Not really right now, I mean, because I was kind of saving, see what they said whenever we actually got to St. Paul location.
Okay, okay.
Let's play by ear.
I'll ask a couple questions to kind of get us prepped for that. You said that in order to attend St. Paul, you traveled by bus quite a distance, and the
Yes.
buses were struggling, so sometimes they break down. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about going to school?
Okay. When I talk about when I was in high school, even though maybe I am getting up in the years, it sounds more like the experiences of someone my mother's age rather than my age. When I went to St. Paul, the buses, I don't remember exactly, but I think we must have caught the bus somewhere around 7:15 or 7:30 in the morning. And that was because we were at the end, so we were the first ones to be picked up.
Mm.
And then they picked up in Emory. That was where I got on the bus. They picked up in Point, they picked up in Lone Oak, and they picked up in Campbell. And there was no straight route. So when we got to school, I guess if we got there without incident or anything, we might have gotten there by 8:30.
Okay.
But if there was anything that held us up, any kind of bus problem or whatever, we did get to school sometimes maybe at noon. And, you know, as a child, if you miss half the day going to school, you don't really feel badly about it.
No.
You know, you really have fun on the way. You know, as long as it's not too cold on the bus when you're waiting. Getting to school late is usually not that bad. But the other side of that is, if the same thing happened and you're on the way home and you have to wait for another bus to finish that kind of route, you end up getting home at night coming from high school. And so, you know, you didn't like that as much as that wasn't as tolerable, I'll say,
Yeah.
as arriving late. If you arrive late, you just go on to whatever class is going on
Straight
at
to
that
lunch.
time. Or go straight to lunch. But it was kind of bad. And then the other thing is, if you look at it from the standpoint of the parents, see, we didn't have cell phones.
Right.
You didn't have cell phones. So if the bus broke down and say you're in Lone Oak, well, you might only be 20 minutes from home, but nobody knows where you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I guess that the bus radio's in somewhere, or
Not radio. The bus driver usually would have to get off the bus and catch a ride somewhere that he could use a telephone.
Right.
You know.
Oh, interesting.
And if it happened near someone's house, then they would let you use the phone, of course. But often the bus driver would get off the bus and he would have to go and, you know, make phone calls. Now he would be arrested for leaving the children.
Mm-hmm.
But
What were you guys doing while you were waiting?
you know, I guess we just had fun. And you know, a lot of times maybe guys would play cards and
No gambling. No. Well, we don't know.
I don't think there was any gambling. I'm not sure that they even played cards. I just know we stayed on the bus a long time sometimes.
You have a question?
Did your mom and dad get worried? How did your parents deal
That's
with
what I'm
this?
saying. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I really don't know.
That's so interesting.
Do you feel like because, I know you said that you said you were ready to go to college after 8th grade. Do you think you got a better education because you were in school longer during the day? I mean, during 1st through 8th grade, you weren't worried about that bus breaking down
Oh, that's
and missing a whole half day of class. Is that why you think you got a better education, or was it just that?
Oh, I missed school a lot when I was at school.
Okay.
I learned how to type when I was in elementary school.
Wow.
And my dad taught me to type. And my dad showed me the basics. And then my teacher, who was my 1st through 3rd grade teacher, she helped me to learn to type. So when I went to high school, I could type. And because of that, I worked in the office.
Oh. Oh.
So a lot of times when reports needed to be done and the school secretary needed help, I worked in the office. And my parents didn't really know that until they heard me talking about it long afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember working in the office a lot of days and not going to class. I also can remember not going to class because the building was too cold.
Oh.
There were days that the building was so cold that you just went where you could stay warm. And the homemaking building was warm, and the shop was warm. So a lot of the guys would go to the shop, and a lot of the girls went to the homemaking building.
Well, that was something sanctioned by the school, I guess. They'd have to get you guys somewhere so you don't freeze.
Yeah, you had to be warm.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting.
What about classes and your teachers and the lessons?
Yeah. But you didn't worry about lessons if you had to go and be warm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if I was in English class and my English class went to the homemaking building, we weren't going to have English
Mm-hmm.
class, and we're going in with the homemaking classes and maybe the history classes. So
Yeah.
you just went and stayed warm.
They do. Wow. That is how. Why was it decided that you would type so early? That is so interesting. What to write letters, or what was the goal in getting you so used to the typewriter so soon? Was that uncommon?
It was uncommon. I don't know of any of my friends that could type. But understand now, my dad didn't have a secretary,
Right. Yeah.
and my dad was principal. So by the time I got to high school, I did a lot of my dad's work as far as his secretarial type work.
That's interesting. It's that the school principal.
Yeah,
That many grades.
and I had very nice handwriting in elementary school. So when time came for graduation and end of the year, when the diplomas had to be filled out and the award certificates, I did those.
Oh, how neat. How neat. And also interesting, though, that you had all of this experience with business work and then did so much work like that in high school at St. Paul, but that you didn't find business as a class, as a place of study until you were back at Raines. That were there business courses at St. Paul? Or
No.
no? Okay.
We had typing, but we really didn't. typing was held in the library, and there were maybe 6 typewriters,
Oh, that's interesting.
and you might have 20-something in a class. And the typewriters really didn't work. So it was kind of like it was just study hall more so than typing class.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite class there? Oh, you loved homemaking. What else did you enjoy?
I liked my English classes. I liked literature, but kind of like most students, I didn't like being picked on by the teacher or called on by the teacher. And I found being in English class very embarrassing because back then they diagrammed sentences. And the teacher liked to call me, she liked to call me to have me come up and diagram sentences. And so I kind of rebelled. I didn't like to do that. And sometimes, a couple of times I might have acted like I didn't really know how to do it because I didn't like being called on every time we diagrammed sentences. But I really did like English.
Okay, okay. So, were there other times you think you kind of had to kind of hide you were smart?
It wasn't so much hiding it as it was just didn't want to be called on
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the time.
Yeah. Here, go talk to somebody else for a little minute. Yeah, yeah. Were there a lot of after-school events going on that would have also held up people going home?
There were basketball games, and there were other things that would go on, but what happened usually, those didn't hold up the buses. The buses would run the regular time, but like if the driver was going to drive for the night game, then he just stayed somewhere, I guess, until time to pick up for the game, and then he picked them up and brought them back to the game.